In one of the wealthiest cities in America, where towering skyscrapers gleamed under dazzling lights, where the rich and powerful were constantly engrossed in business and ambition, a love story unfolded, one that began in youth and endured into adulthood. Isabella Montgomery, the only daughter of the richest billionaire in the country. She was born with everything others could ever wish for: beauty, intelligence, and a life of luxury without worries. Yet, her heart had always belonged to just one person, Nathaniel Whitmore, the boy she had secretly loved since high school. One late afternoon at St. Helena High School, the golden hues of the sunset stretched across the sky, casting a warm glow over the basketball court. Isabella stood quietly at the sidelines, watching Nathaniel play with his friends. She knew he would never notice her in the crowd, but just seeing him every day was enough to make her heart flutter. Suddenly, the gym teacher's whistle blew, signaling the start of the running drills. Isabella tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and quickly joined the line with the other girls. But as she ran, her foot accidentally caught on a small rock, and she tumbled to the ground. "Careful!" a deep voice called out. The next moment, a strong hand lifted her up. Isabella's eyes widened in shock as she realized it was Nathaniel. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern evident in his gaze. Flustered, Isabella quickly shook her head, trying to hide the blush spreading across her cheeks. I'm fine. Thank you." Nathaniel frowned slightly as he noticed her wincing in pain. Without hesitation, he bent down and effortlessly picked her up in his arms, drawing gasps from the students around them. "Hey, what are you doing? I can walk." Isabella protested, her voice tinged with embarrassment. Nathaniel simply smiled. "You sprained your ankle. I'll take you to the nurse's office." For the first time, Isabella was this close to him. She could hear his heartbeat, feel the warmth of his body. It was just a fleeting moment for him, but for her, it was a memory she would treasure forever. And thus began a love story filled with tears and longing. Years passed, and Nathaniel Whitmore had become one of the most outstanding young entrepreneurs in the country. He was a rising star in the business world, known for his sharp mind, charisma, and relentless determination. His name appeared on the covers of business magazines, and investors sought his expertise. The young boy from high school had transformed into a formidable businessman. Meanwhile, Isabella had spent years abroad, pursuing her own ambitions. But now, she was finally returning home. Upon her arrival, her father, Richard Montgomery, welcomed her back with open arms. Over dinner, he presented her with an intriguing proposal. "Isabella, there's someone I want you to meet," Richard said, handing her a business profile. "He's an exceptional young man, a visionary, much like your mother and me when we built our empire." Curious, Isabella took the file and flipped through the pages. The moment she saw the name on the document, her breath hitched. Nathaniel Whitmore, the boy she had loved for so many years. "You know him, don't you?" her father asked, observing her expression. "He's an ideal candidate. Smart, driven, and already making a name for himself." Isabella hesitated, processing the whirlwind of emotions rushing through her. "You want me to marry him?" Richard nodded. "It would be a perfect alliance. Our families share the same vision. This union would strengthen both of our empires." A lump formed in her throat. She had dreamed of being close to Nathaniel, but not like this. Not in a business transaction arranged by their families. She wanted to be with him because of love, not strategy. After a moment of silence, she made a bold decision. "Father, let me do this my way," she said. "Before I agree to anything, I want to know who he really is. Let me work for him, but not as Isabella Montgomery. I want to hide my identity and apply as his assistant." Richard raised an eyebrow but chuckled. "You've always been stubborn, just like your mother." "Very well. If this is how you wish to proceed, I won't stop you. But remember, this is not a game. If you fail, there will be consequences." A small smile tugged at Isabella's lips. "I won't fail." And with that, she prepared herself to step into Nathaniel's world, not as the heiress of a billion-dollar empire, but as an ordinary assistant who would finally get the chance to be by his side. The next morning, Isabella found herself rushing through the bustling city streets, clutching her resume in hand. Due to the time difference after years of living abroad, She had overslept and was now running late for her interview at Whitmore Enterprises. As she reached the towering glass skyscraper, she hurried towards the elevator, but just as she stepped in, she collided into someone. Hard. "Watch where you're going," a deep, irritated voice snapped. Isabella looked up, her heart skipping a beat. Nathaniel Whitmore stood before her, his sharp blue eyes filled with annoyance. I'm sorry," she stammered, trying to compose herself. Nathaniel sighed, brushing off his suit. "Next time, be more careful." With that, he stepped into the elevator, completely unaware of who she truly was. Minutes later, she sat across from him in the interview room. Despite his initial cold demeanor, Isabella remained poised. She spoke with confidence, showcasing her fluency in 5 languages and her sharp communication skills. Nathaniel studied her intently, arms crossed. "You're certainly qualified, but something about you seems familiar." Isabella forced a smile. "I guess I just have one of those faces." After a pause, he finally nodded. "Fine, you're hired. But don't expect any special treatment. I don't tolerate mistakes." As Isabella left his office, her heart pounded. She had secured the position. Now, she was one step closer to being by his side. But could she keep her secret hidden forever? Meanwhile, Nathaniel's mother, Evelyn Whitmore, had long harbored ambitions of uniting their family with the Montgomerys. She and Richard Montgomery had been close friends since their youth, and she saw this marriage as the ultimate strategic alliance. "Nathaniel, you must come with me to meet the Montgomerys for dinner," she insisted one afternoon. Nathaniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mother, I'm not interested in an arranged marriage." Evelyn scoffed. "This isn't just any woman. Isabella Montgomery is refined, intelligent, and comes from a family as powerful as ours. It's the perfect match." Reluctantly, Nathaniel agreed. However, upon arriving at the Montgomery estate, Richard met them at the door with an apologetic expression. "I'm afraid Isabella isn't feeling well today. She won't be able to join us," Richard explained. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Unwell, or simply uninterested?" Evelyn shot him a disapproving glance. "Nathaniel," Richard sighed. "She truly isn't well, but I assure you, she would have loved to meet you." Nathaniel let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Right. The rich heiress too good to keep a simple dinner appointment. You and my mother can plan all you want, Mr. Montgomery, but I will not marry someone I've never met, let alone someone who treats me like an inconvenience." With that, he turned and walked away, his mind made up. Isabella, unaware of the storm she had unknowingly created, remained blissfully ignorant of his growing resentment toward her. The next morning, Nathaniel arrived at his office, already irritated by the previous night's events. He had no time for distractions, especially when his schedule was packed with meetings and deals. That was when his new assistant, Ellie Harper, walked in. He barely glanced at her at first, occupied with reviewing reports. But as she stood before him, her poised presence caught his attention. She was striking, not in an overly polished way, but in an effortlessly elegant manner. Her deep green eyes were sharp and intelligent, framed by soft, chestnut waves pulled into a neat bun. She carried herself with quiet confidence, unshaken by his cold demeanor. "Mr. Whitmore," she said smoothly, placing a neatly organized folder on his desk, "your schedule for the day has been adjusted to accommodate the board's last-minute request. I've also taken the liberty of preparing notes for your upcoming investor meeting." Nathaniel arched an eyebrow, mildly impressed by her efficiency. "You've only been here a day, and you're already changing my schedule?" Ellie met his gaze without hesitation. "Only to optimize your time, sir. I assumed you'd prefer efficiency over formality." He studied her for a moment. Most assistants hesitated around him, stumbling over words or trying too hard to impress. But she was different, composed, prepared, and entirely unbothered by his reputation. "We'll see if you live up to that assumption," he said curtly, flipping through the documents. Throughout the day, she continued to exceed his expectations. She navigated through the company's demanding environment with ease, handling unexpected problems with a level of professionalism that was rare to find. Her fluency in multiple languages proved invaluable during international calls, and she defused tense negotiations with sharp, calculated responses. For someone new, she was far too competent. As he watched her handle yet another situation seamlessly, a strange sense of familiarity crept into his mind. There was something about the way she spoke, the way she carried herself, that felt oddly recognizable. Nathaniel shook off the thought. It was just a coincidence. Or so he told himself. Nathaniel was soon faced with one of the most challenging projects of his career, a high-stakes deal with Montgomery Industries, led by none other than Charles Montgomery, Isabella's uncle. The project was crucial for the expansion of Whitmore Enterprises, but despite his flawless proposal, Charles declined the partnership, citing incompatibility of vision. Nathaniel took the rejection harder than he expected. He was used to winning, to closing deals seamlessly. That night, he sat in his office, replaying the conversation in his mind, trying to figure out his next move. Meanwhile, Isabella, still in her disguise as Ellie, decided to intervene. She arranged a private meeting with her uncle, requesting that Nathaniel attend. When they met at an upscale lounge, Charles raised a curious brow as he saw Ellie beside Nathaniel. "Uncle Charles," Isabella began, her voice steady, "I have something to tell you. I'm not just Ellie Harper. I'm Isabella Montgomery." Nathaniel's head snapped toward her, his eyes filled with disbelief. Before he could speak, she continued, "I've been working under Nathaniel to see what kind of man he truly is, and I can tell you with certainty, he is someone worth investing in." Charles studied her for a moment before exhaling a chuckle. "So, this was your plan all along? Testing him?" Isabella nodded. "I needed to know for myself, and now, I need your help. This project, give him a chance. Not because of our family's past, but because he truly deserves it." Charles leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "You're putting your reputation on the line for him. That means something." After a long pause, he finally said, "All right, Isabella, I'll reconsider the deal. But he has to prove himself." The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows of his penthouse, Nathaniel's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He groggily reached for it, blinking at the caller ID. It was Charles Montgomery's assistant. "Mr. Whitmore, Mr. Montgomery has reviewed your proposal and would like to set up a meeting to discuss final adjustments. He believes there is potential for collaboration." Nathaniel immediately sat up, fully awake. "That's incredible news. Thank you. I'll be there." Hanging up, he ran a hand through his hair, a genuine smile tugging at his lips. Without hesitation, he reached for his phone again, dialing Ellie's number. "Ellie, you won't believe this. Charles Montgomery wants to meet again. He's reconsidering our proposal." Ellie, who was sipping her morning coffee, forced a surprised tone. "That's great, Mr. Whitmore. I knew your persistence would pay off." Nathaniel exhaled a breath of relief. "This deal means everything. I need to make sure everything is perfect this time." Later that day, Nathaniel arrived at Montgomery Industries for the scheduled meeting. This time, Charles greeted him with a firm handshake. "Nathaniel," Charles said, "I took another look at your proposal. I see the potential now. Let's make this partnership work." After a lengthy and productive discussion, the two men signed the official agreement, sealing the collaboration between their companies. As they shook hands, Nathaniel couldn't help but feel an odd sense of gratitude, though he had no idea who had truly paved the way for this opportunity. Meanwhile, Isabella watched from the sidelines, a satisfied smile on her lips. She had done her part, and for now, that was enough. A few days later, Nathaniel and Ellie went to survey the new project site. The terrain was rugged, and as they walked through an uneven patch, Ellie suddenly tripped over a loose stone. She let out a small yelp as she stumbled, twisting her ankle. Nathaniel immediately rushed to her side. "Are you all right?" Ellie winced, trying to put weight on her foot, but the sharp pain forced her to stop. "I think I twisted my ankle." Nathaniel let out a sigh, glancing around. They were too far from the car for her to limp back. Without hesitation, he crouched down. "Come on, get on. I'll carry you." "What? No, I can walk." He shot her a look. "Ellie, don't argue. We're in the middle of nowhere, and I'm not leaving you here." Reluctantly, she wrapped her arms around his shoulders, and he effortlessly lifted her onto his back. As they made their way back, A comfortable silence settled between them before Nathaniel finally broke it. You never talk much about yourself. Where did you grow up? Ellie hesitated before answering. Different places. My family moved around a lot when I was young. That must have been tough. Not having a real home. She smiled softly. It had its moments, but it also taught me how to adapt. She paused before turning the question on him. What about you? What was it like growing up as Nathaniel Whitmore? He chuckled dryly. Strict. Structured. My father expected nothing less than perfection. There was never much room for failure. Ellie frowned. That sounds lonely. Nathaniel's grip tightened slightly. Maybe, but it made me who I am, and I don't regret it. She rested her chin lightly on his shoulder, her voice softer. You don't always have to carry everything alone, you know? He didn't respond right away, her words sinking in deeper than he expected. For the first time, he realized how easy it was to talk to her, how natural it felt. They fell silent again, but something about the conversation lingered between them. For the first time, they were not CEO and assistant. They were just two people getting to know each other, one step at a time. As they finally reached the car and prepared to head back, Nathaniel turned the key, only to hear a sputtering sound. The engine refused to start. After several failed attempts, he pulled out his phone to call for roadside assistance. Mr. Whitmore, I'm sorry, but the soonest we can get someone out there is tomorrow morning, the dispatcher informed him. Nathaniel sighed in frustration, pinching the bridge of his nose. Great. Looks like we're stuck here for the night. Ellie glanced at him, suppressing a small laugh. Well, I suppose there are worse places to be stranded. Nathaniel smirked. You find this amusing? A little, she admitted. It's the first time I've seen you lose control of a situation. He chuckled, leaning back in his seat. Trust me, I'm not thrilled about it either. But at least I have decent company. They talked for a while, sharing stories about their lives, work, and childhood dreams. As the night deepened, Ellie's voice grew softer, and before long, she had drifted off to sleep, her head resting against the window. Nathaniel turned to look at her, his gaze lingering. He thought back to the moment he carried her on his back, the way she had felt so close yet so distant. A strange warmth spread through his chest. Without thinking, he shrugged off his jacket and carefully draped it over her. As he leaned back, staring at the dark sky outside, he exhaled slowly. Was this what it felt like to fall in love? The next morning, Nathaniel and Ellie returned to the office after their unexpected night stuck in the car. As soon as they stepped inside, a hush fell over the employees before whispers began spreading through the company like wildfire. Did they just arrive together? That's never happened before. Mr. Whitmore never lets anyone ride with him. Something's definitely going on between them. The murmurs only grew louder, and before long, the gossip had reached Evelyn Whitmore's ears. It didn't take long before she arrived at the company, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors as she made her way to Nathaniel's office. Ellie was organizing documents when she heard the firm, unmistakable voice of Evelyn. Miss Harper, I believe we need to have a word. Ellie looked up to see Evelyn standing in the doorway, her gaze cold and assessing. Straightening her posture, she forced a polite smile. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. How can I help you? Evelyn stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I'll be direct. What exactly is your relationship with my son? Ellie blinked, caught off guard by the abruptness of the question. I'm his assistant. Nothing more. Evelyn let out a dry laugh. Really? Because the entire company seems to think otherwise. You disappeared with him overnight, and now you waltz in together as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Do you have any idea what that looks like? Ellie took a steady breath. It was a work-related trip, and there were unforeseen circumstances. That's all. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. I know women like you, Miss Harper, climbing your way up by getting close to powerful men. But let me make something clear. You are nothing compared to the women truly worthy of Nathaniel. Do you understand me? Ellie clenched her hands at her sides, but kept her voice calm. With all due respect, Mrs. Whitmore, my only concern is assisting Mr. Whitmore in his business endeavors. Evelyn scoffed. That's good to hear. Because Nathaniel is destined for someone of proper standing. Someone like Isabella Montgomery. Not a mere assistant. Ellie forced a neutral expression despite the sting of those words. I appreciate your concerns, Mrs. Whitmore, but I assure you, I have no intention of overstepping my role. Evelyn studied her for a long moment before letting out a small, satisfied huff. Good. Keep it that way. With that, she turned on her heel and exited the office, only to come face to face with Nathaniel. His sharp gaze met his mother's, his expression unreadable. Mother, I think we need to talk. Evelyn crossed her arms. I was just ensuring your assistant understands her place. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. Her place? Mother, Ellie is not just an assistant to me. And let me make one thing clear. I will not be meeting Isabella Montgomery, nor will I entertain any marriage arrangement you want for me. Evelyn's face paled slightly. Nathaniel, be reasonable. You cannot seriously. I can and I will, he interrupted firmly. I'm going to pursue Ellie, whether you approve or not. So I suggest you get used to it. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. You'll regret this. Nathaniel's gaze remained steady. No, Mother. For the first time in a long time, I don't think I will. With that, he walked past her, heading straight for Ellie's office. Evelyn stood frozen, realizing for the first time that she might have just lost control over her son's future. After Nathaniel confronted his mother and declared his intentions, he walked straight into Ellie's office. Mr. Whitmore? Ellie looked up, her heart still racing from her earlier conversation with his mother. Nathaniel shut the door behind him. Ellie, I heard everything. Are you all right? Ellie hesitated, then nodded. I can handle it. Nathaniel took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. I need you to know something. I have no interest in Isabella Montgomery. I never have. Ellie's heart pounded in her chest. The man she had secretly loved for years, the man who was always untouchable, was standing before her, making a confession she never imagined hearing. She swallowed. Why are you telling me this? Nathaniel exhaled softly. Because I want to pursue you, Ellie. Not as my assistant, but as the woman I've come to admire and care for. Ellie's mind raced. This was impossible. A man like him, powerful, unattainable, wanting someone like her? Why me? She finally asked. Nathaniel smiled, a rare, genuine expression. Because with you, I don't have to pretend. You see me as I am, not just as some untouchable CEO. And for the first time, I don't want to fight this anymore. Ellie felt a warmth spread through her chest, but she remained cautious. Nathaniel, this is a lot? He nodded, understanding. I don't expect an answer right now, but let me prove it to you. Have dinner with me this weekend. No business, no work, just us. Ellie hesitated for only a moment before she found herself nodding. Okay, one dinner. Nathaniel's smile deepened. One dinner for now. Ellie's mind raced. This was impossible. A man like him, powerful, unattainable, wanting someone like her? Why me? She finally asked. Nathaniel smiled, a rare, genuine expression. Because with you, I don't have to pretend. You see me as I am, not just as some untouchable CEO. And for the first time, I don't want to fight this anymore. Ellie felt a warmth spread through her chest, but she remained cautious. Nathaniel, this is a lot? He nodded, understanding. I don't expect an answer right now, but let me prove it to you. Have dinner with me this weekend. No business, no work, just us. Ellie hesitated for only a moment before she found herself nodding. Okay, one dinner. Nathaniel's smile deepened. One dinner for now. That evening, Nathaniel arrived at Ellie's apartment, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. He held a bouquet of fresh red roses in one hand, his other adjusting the cuffs of his shirt as he rang the doorbell. Ellie opened the door, her breath catching slightly at the sight of him. Nathaniel, you didn't have to bring flowers. He smirked slightly, offering them to her. I wanted to. A beautiful woman deserves beautiful flowers. She took them with a small smile, trying to ignore the way her heart pounded. Thank you. They're lovely. Nathaniel glanced at her outfit, a stunning yet elegant dress that suited her perfectly. You look incredible, he said, his voice softer. Ellie felt her cheeks warm. You're not so bad yourself. He chuckled. Shall we? With that, he led her to his car, opening the door for her before they headed to one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. As they settled into their seats, Nathaniel poured Ellie a glass of wine and leaned in slightly. Tell me about your time studying abroad. I don't think I've ever asked you that before. Ellie smiled as she twirled the stem of her glass. It was an experience I'll never forget. At first, it was terrifying. New country, new culture, and I didn't know a single person there. But after a while, I started to love it. The independence, the adventure. It was exhilarating. Nathaniel's gaze softened. What was your favorite part? She thought for a moment before answering. The people I met. I had friends from all over the world, and they taught me things I never would have learned otherwise. And the food. Oh, the pastries in Paris were absolutely divine. Nathaniel chuckled. So, you were there for the pastries? Ellie laughed, her eyes sparkling. Partially, but also, I got to travel a lot. Italy, Spain, even Japan. It made me realize how small my world had been before. He nodded thoughtfully. I envy that. My world has always been structured. Every step, every decision planned out for me. I never really had the chance to just explore. Ellie tilted her head. Well, maybe it's not too late for you to start. Nathaniel held her gaze, his lips curving into a small smile. Maybe not. As the two enjoyed their candlelit dinner, an unexpected figure walked past their table, Richard Montgomery. Nathaniel immediately rose to his feet, straightening his posture. Mr. Montgomery, he greeted with a respectful nod. Richard glanced at the two, his gaze landing on Ellie before returning to Nathaniel. Nathaniel, a surprise seeing you here. Nathaniel took a deep breath. Sir, I want to make something clear. I will not be meeting or marrying your daughter. I've made my decision. Ellie tensed slightly, but Richard merely chuckled. Oh, and who is this young lady? Nathaniel turned to Ellie, his eyes filled with certainty. This is Ellie, the woman I am pursuing. Richard looked at his daughter, their eyes locking for a brief moment. A slow smile spread across his face. Is that so? Well, this is an interesting development. Ellie felt a rush of emotions, surprise, relief, and a warmth she couldn't quite place. Her father let out a hearty laugh before nodding. Enjoy your dinner, you two. We'll talk later. And with that, he walked away, leaving Nathaniel and Ellie looking at each other, both feeling that the night had just taken an unexpected turn. A few days later, Nathaniel invited Ellie to spend the weekend with him at a private beachside resort. The sun was setting as they walked along the shoreline, the waves gently lapping at their feet. The salty breeze mixed with the warmth of the setting sun, creating an atmosphere that felt almost magical. Nathaniel reached for Ellie's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. You look beautiful in this light, he murmured, his voice low and intimate. Ellie smiled, glancing up at him. You say that like I don't look beautiful in any other light? He chuckled, pulling her a little closer. You do, but right now, you look breathtaking. They continued walking until they reached a secluded cove where a small bonfire had been set up. Nathaniel had arranged everything: soft blankets, a bottle of wine, and a picnic prepared by the resort's chef. As they sat beside each other, the fire casting a warm glow over their faces, Ellie took a sip of her wine and leaned into Nathaniel. This is nice, she admitted. I didn't think you were the kind of man who knew how to slow down. Nathaniel sighed, his arm draping over her shoulders. I wasn't, but you make me want to. Ellie looked up at him, her heart pounding as she saw the sincerity in his gaze. Nathaniel, before she could say another word, he cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing against her cheek. Ellie, from the moment I met you, you've been changing everything I thought I knew about myself. I don't want to fight it anymore. She felt her breath hitch as he leaned in, their lips meeting in a slow, passionate kiss. The world around them faded away, leaving only the sound of the waves and the warmth of their bodies pressed together. That night, in the quiet embrace of their secluded paradise, they gave in to the undeniable pull between them. The stars above bore witness to their passion, as they finally surrendered to the emotions they had been trying to suppress for so long.